I'd like to say good morning to everyone and welcome back to a new school year. And today we want to spend some time thinking about a new way to look at our curriculum. Today we want to look at our curriculum in a different way by looking at a backwards design model for our curriculum. Now, Stephen Covey states in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that you begin with the end in mind. As we look at our curriculum today and look at it a different way, we always want to think we're beginning with the end in mind. So we want to look at the big picture of what we're covering and work towards an end result. You must have a clear picture in your mind of your destination. So to get that clear picture in our mind of what backwards design is going to look like, we're going to use the illustration of traveling from Texas to Florida. When we think about backwards design, we want to think about how does it look, okay? With that picture of traveling from Texas to Florida in your mind, I want you to think about the states that we travel through on our route from Texas to Florida. We begin in Texas, we travel through Louisiana, we travel through Mississippi, we travel through Alabama and then Georgia, and then our final destination is Florida, where Disney World is. We know the route that we're going to take because we've looked at it on a map. We have our trip planned out, our route is planned out. We know what major interstates we're going to be on. We know what state highways we're going to get on. So we've looked at our map and understand what our destination is going to be and how to reach our destination. We understand what states we're going to be traveling through and where we plan to make stops and what hotels we will be staying in as we make those stops. So as we keep traveling on through backwards design, I want you to continue to have that picture of traveling from Texas to Florida in your mind. Now, when we thinking about backwards design, we want to think about how is planning curriculum even related to backwards design. So when we think about planning a trip, we think about how long is this trip going to take us. This is going to be very similar to deciding how long in our curriculum is it going to take us to teach certain objectives. When we were deciding what stops we were going to make going from Texas to Florida, it's like deciding in our curriculum what our curriculum, our objectives are going to look like. How are our students going to see the big picture of what we are teaching? Using a map on your trip is like using and creating our scope and sequence that we're going to follow. We want to make sure we follow it carefully. We want to make sure that we don't have any spots that we do detour because remember, we were trying to reach our final destination. So stopping at different hotels at various spots on our trip is very similar to stopping at points to assess our students and how they have mastered certain skills that we've taught. What overall questions do we want to look at when we think about backwards design? What do we want to consider? The first thing we want to consider are our desired results, what our assessment is going to look like, and how we're going to plan for instruction. Now, I just mentioned to you the 3 stages in a backwards design. The first stage is identifying our desired results. These are our curriculum priorities. These are our state standards that we know that we are going to have to teach at our 6th grade level. Determining our acceptable evidence is stage 2. Did the students achieve those desired results that we set out for them to achieve? If we did, we're moving on to stage 3, which is planning our learning experiences. How are we going to plan for our instruction? We know that we have many different instructional strategies that we can use to get our students to master certain objectives in our classroom. So we want to make sure that we plan those objectives, plan those activities that will make sure that we're covering those objectives. We want to make sure, remember, that the students get the big picture. And if we have to have those instructional strategies in place, within our classroom so that the students will understand the concepts that we're going to be teaching. Now, our plans for today. What we want to do is we want to look at our TEKS. We want to look at our TEKS at the second grade level and TEKS that we want to cover during our first 6 weeks of school, because that's going to be our starting point. That's going to be what helps us to get our trip off to a great start. We'll want to look at our TEKS, and we want to create questions that's going to cover those TEKS that we're utilizing during this 6 weeks. As we complete the day, we want to leave with a document that we can post in our classroom, that we can physically have up with questions on them or stems on them that show the students how they're going to be asked on our big common assessment at the end of the 6 weeks. So we want to make sure that we have some good questions that we have posted up, that our students will be able to continuously look back, and we can look back as teachers to make sure that we're covering those objectives. So as we progress through the 6 weeks, we will have weekly assessments, stopping points, like those hotels that we talked about on our trip. And those stopping points is where we will be assessing our students, looking at the data to see if our students are mastering those objectives, to decide, whether or not we need to keep going on with our journey, just like in this trip from Texas to Florida. During the first 6 weeks assessment, as we're looking at our planning, we want to develop an assessment that covers our first 6 weeks objectives. The first one we want to look at is 6.1b. We want to look and make sure that students are generating equivalent fraction forms of rational numbers, including whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. We want to make sure that we are covering 6.2a, modeling addition and subtractions of fractions with objects, pictures, words, and numbers. And then our last objective we want to make sure we're covering is 6.2b, using addition and subtraction to solve problems involving fractions and decimals. We have a variety of sources out there on the internet and even right here on our campus that we can use to gather good quality questions to cover those objectives. Some of the material we might want to keep in mind as we are planning out those questions. Think about Mentoring Minds. Has some good possibilities of some questions we might want to use, and make sure that they're worded at that high level that's matched up with our STAR objectives. We want to make sure that we have used STAR Mastery, which is another tool that has some good questions, stems that we might want to follow. And most certainly we want to look at our Kilgo stems. Those are some excellent ways to look at how we're wording those questions, because those questions, remember on STAR, are going to be geared towards our high level. So we want to make sure that we're covering those objectives and putting in words on our assessments the way that those questions will be asked on a STAR type assessment or on our common assessments. We want to have at least 10 questions. And the reason why I said 10 is because you want to have just a brief snapshot of the objectives that you've taught, questions that back up those objectives to determine if the students master those skills by week. After we look at, give those assessments, we want to load them into DMAT and then be able to look at our data from those to see which objectives are the students still not mastering. We need to have at least 6 weekly assessments for the first 6 weeks that cover the objectives that we decided that we were going to cover. Again, that's 6.1b, 6.2a, and 6.2b. So we want to make sure that we have a good match. Now, what do we want our final product to look like? How is our day going to end? What should we leave here in our hands? We need to leave here today with 1 6 weeks assessment and with at least 20 questions that cover the TEKS that we've taught during the first 6 weeks of school. Then we want to be able to leave here with at least 6 weekly assessments that shows what we covered each week that will link into our big 6 weeks assessment. So we want to be able to look at those weekly assessments to see, did our students master those objectives, and continue to find spots to loop or those skills back in if our students did not master them. So we want to make sure that our students are progressing successfully through the first 6 weeks and other 6 weeks as we continue to meet back and plan for these weekly assessments and our big common assessments. So we have a lot of groundwork that we need to cover today. I hope we have a good picture in our mind. Remember, think about that trip going to Florida. As we're planning, we remember, we want to know our destination spots. We know where we're going to stop. We need to make sure that we're on target and that we're accomplishing our goal, because even at the end of this day, we want to make sure that whatever we decided that we were going to accomplish today, did we begin with the end in mind to be able to leave here with that final product.